like to welcome Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester, and Anne Morgan, Head of Planning Strategy for GMCA, to the meeting. Thank you for taking the time to come out and talk to our group today. We really appreciate it. And we're much looking forward to a sustained relationship going forward.
I am here because I want to give you a full explanation as to how we've got to the point that we're at, but also to show, not just from myself, Anne Morgan from the GMCA, Rachel, Kevin, who works in my office, we're here because we want to listen and we want to show to you today that this is a genuine exercise. It's being done in the right way, not being sort of, bulldozed through, but being done as part of a genuine consultation, which is the way we always try to do things from a Greater Manchester perspective and in terms of the way the combined authority works. I don't want to speak for too long at the beginning, but I want to just cover some really important points. Firstly, why are we having a Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, just to kind of re-establish that. Secondly, the process of the rewrite that we went through. And then thirdly, where we go from here. So the first point, why a GMSF? There are people who say, let's just get rid of the whole thing, scrap the whole exercise. I think there's a few points to say in response to that. We're really clear that having a spatial framework that is coherent and complementary to other Greater Manchester policies, particularly transport, from random development, and actually protects the Greenbelt. So as difficult as this process is, it is actually a way of protecting communities from unwanted development and from allowing councils to be picked off one by one and then subject to plans that they may not want to see. It actually strengthens us all to get the development that is in the right place and that is sustainable. The second reason for having it is it actually allows us to sort of balance off different priorities across Greater Manchester. So in the draft that we've recently produced, and it is a draft and it's open for consultation, Manchester and Salford are building above housing need. And that allows us to reduce housing need in other boroughs. So you can redistribute within when you have a framework of this kind. And that means for many of our outlying boroughs, they actually are taking less Greenbelt than they would otherwise have had to do if they were building just on their own. And it's a really important point that, that this does allow a process of reallocation around Greater Manchester. And we can talk more about that in discussion. It also allows us to prioritise areas for investment and steer development where we most want to see it, particularly to parts of the north of the conurbation. And it has allowed us to put forward some stronger environmental policies, particularly on zero carbon development, which we are saying 2028 should be the date by which we do that, and a very strong policy stance in opposition to fracking in Greater Manchester. So that spatial framework is a vehicle for those stronger environmental policies. So that's why we're doing it, and I just wanted to re-establish that. Coming on to what we've been doing in the 2 years since I was elected, I did promise a radical rewrite, and I believe this is a radical rewrite. The minute I arrived in the GMCA, I asked Anne and the team to begin that radical rewrite, focusing again on brownfield, particularly on town centres, with higher density development in those places. And that is how we then began a whole process of rethinking the way the whole plan works, and it's allowed us obviously to then relieve some of the pressure on the Greenbelt. I had a commitment of an aim of no net loss. I described it as such, not as a firm promise, but as an aim, because obviously some of this is out of my control, particularly the national methodology that plans like this have to be guided by. But when we saw the ONS figures, I can assure you, the ones that came out last year, that we were working to that aim. That was the way the team was working. It was then when the government's methodology came out that we then had to take a decision about what were the numbers that were going to be used in this plan. So we were working on a lower basis. The government methodology arrived, and then we had to consider what to do. The strong advice from government was that our plan wouldn't be sound if we went out not listening to the government methodology. And there are many other authorities in the same position of us who followed the same advice. I think Rossendale, Warrington, St Helens, a lot of authorities are having to do the same. Now we can have a debate about those figures, but that's what we've had to do. But nevertheless, I say it's the radical rewrite I promised, because we have taken reduced Greenbelt take by over a half, and there are substantially different plans now in place, although I fully accept that they are probably not the plans that you would want to see. But of course I can't please everybody with this, can I? It's impossible to do that. We do need more homes in Greater Manchester. We do want to support our local industrial strategy, the ambitions we have there, and I'm trying to do that at all times by being as fair as I possibly can. But that is how we've ended up with where we are. I'll finish on this point in terms of where we go from here. Well, you know, I would be here because it's my job to be accountable to you, but the team don't have to be here on a Saturday, and I think the fact that they are here, I hope you'll see as a sign of a genuine commitment to listen and work with you and go through this process together. And that's what we're here to do. I mean, I can't respond to site-specific questions today, but the team will absolutely but by all means raise those points, and we will take them on board today. And so, you know, everything that's said will be captured. One thing I would want to offer, if it's something that's of interest to any of the groups represented here today, is to, on the one hand you might say, well, you know, we just want to oppose what's being done, and I fully understand that. But if there are groups who want to oppose but also talk to us about the transport implications, one of the things that I would do, if it's of interest, is set up working groups around transport for any of the groups represented today, if you wanted to do that, whereby we would ask TFGM to send some representatives to that working group and start to talk more seriously about what might be the transport solution based on your local knowledge that would make, if there is to be development, and if there is to be development is the key point, what kind of transport scheme would you like to see that then would make that more sustainable? So that's an offer. You know, I don't know whether it's of interest to all of the groups, but I just thought I'd make it at the beginning to see if we can, you know, start to get in some constructive dialogue about how we make this whole thing work. But that's it from me to begin with. Thank you for listening, and really keen to get into the discussion. So thank you, Zoe.
Thank you so much, and I think all of our groups will probably take you up on that. Okay. So something we'll be very interested in. Right, so we're going to dive into our set of questions now. So the first question is, we know that you've recently presented to partners across the region the statement of common ground. We have a question about that from our group in Heald Green. So,
hi. According to your statement of common ground, there are 10 local authorities with housing duties which surround GM. Again, according to your statement of common ground, only some of these have stated they cannot accommodate any of GM's housing desires. For example, West Lancs are waiting for the GM Greenbelt review, East Cheshire have suggested expanding the North Cheshire Growth Village, and Blackburn and Darwin are worried that GM may affect their own housing proposals. What is the current situation with respect to the neighbouring authorities?
I think Anne will be better placed to answer this. I don't want to do the politician thing all afternoon and pass anything difficult, but we have ongoing dialogue with all of the authorities around, and that has been happening as we've been going through this plan. But Anne will be in a position to give you a much more factual answer to that question.
But quite short, I think. We did have a meeting with all of our neighbouring authorities on Wednesday, although not all of them made it because of the snow. But at that meeting, all of the districts who were there, so Cheshire East were there, West Lancs weren't there, they all confirmed at this moment they can't take any of our housing need. Most of them asked us if we were willing to take any of their housing need. We declined that offer. The only district who have been keen to talk to us in more detail, West Lancs have kept a very holding position, but whenever we've talked about it, their position is always a holding one, and the only real interest they have is with Wigan, because that's where their relationship is, and if there was a need to sort of look and see if there was any common ground between Wigan and themselves. But actually we've never been able to get any concrete agreement from them that they were willing to take that on board. Burnley have expressed an interest. but Burnley are quite a long way from Greater Manchester in terms of that relationship, and it's quite hard to work out what the functional relationship between ourselves and Burnley are. But it's something we continue throughout the process. We have meetings and regular contact with all of our neighbouring authorities, and we've increased that now to the Leeds and the Liverpool City region, so we're actually speaking on a wider basis now that we've got more combined authorities. But at the moment nobody is jumping up and down willing to take our numbers, and they always look to Greater Manchester and hope actually that we'll take some of theirs.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is going to come from myself. We watched the GMCA meeting on the 11th of the 1st with interest, and in that Alex Gnotis said that he had moved 5,000 homes in Stockport to other boroughs. So we was wondering where we can get the information as to how the housing has been redistributed across GM. Where would we find that information?
Me again?
Yeah, it is you again. I mean, we can provide that information, as I think is the answer, but Anne will give me the official version. But I have seen figures which show the way in which the numbers are being kind of redistributed, if you like, and it is true that Stockport are being offset by, I think, Salford and Manchester, as I said at the beginning. So, Salford. Yeah.
We have got a very large document called the Spatial Framework, which you'll have seen, accompanied by quite a lot of supporting documents on the website, which hopefully you have seen. One of those is called the Strategic Housing Market Assessment, but it is also accompanied by a housing topic paper, and in the topic papers what we've tried to do, because the feedback last time was there was a plan, nobody could quite understand how we got to that plan, but there was a lot of evidence, but it was really difficult, it was very technical, and it was hard to see how the evidence had influenced the plan. So this time what we've done is produce a series of topic papers that tries to distill the main evidence, talks about what people said last time on that subject, and then provides a bridge to the spatial framework. So the housing topic paper sets out how we've got to the position we're in now. So there is a table that has what's called the district local housing need figure. So if you use the government methodology, that gives you for each district. And then there's the housing target, which is in GMSF. And when you look at those two tables, and I've got it in front of me, so if it's not there, I mean, if it's easier, I could just actually circulate this to you to send to the group, the table that has, if districts were doing this themselves, what their local housing need figure would be, what the housing target in GMSF is, and whether that means their figure is higher or lower, if they're part of the GMSF, or if they're doing it alone. So that's the figure that tells you that, for example.
Is it possible to list those like Stockport in the same position as Stockport?
So the districts that have less housing are Bolton, Bury, Stockport, Tameside and Trafford. The districts that have almost and Tameside, sorry, yes, did I say Tameside? Manchester and Salford are taking the bulk of that, so they're providing around 45% of the overall housing need for Greater Manchester, and then Wigan and Rochdale and Oldham not quite so much. Wigan and Rochdale are providing higher than their housing need. Wigan and Rochdale also have a very high baseline land supply as well, which is why their figures are higher. So I can share that, but it's what we've worked on as a basis that every district has to provide a really significant proportion of their own housing to meet their own housing needs, so that we're not saying if you live in Stockport and you want a new house in the future, you've got to go live in Tameside, because we're not going to build any in Stockport. So no district is providing less than 70% of their requirement, and no district is providing more than 125%, but that is set out in the table, so it should be in the housing topic paper, but I'll also circulate this just so you've got it definitely in one place.
That's great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to figures now. So this might be Anne again. Sorry, Andy. Our Woodford group want to ask a question that all our groups want the answer to. So can somebody from Woodford?
Just a brief interlude on Woodford. We're probably rare in amongst the other groups in that we think the change in GMF2 is sensible for Woodford, and that it moves to the aerodrome site. although we're worried about the numbers. But on behalf of all the groups, just addressing the number predictions, we know that you had to use the government 2014 figures, but that's a consultation document, and the consultation's closed. What happens if the advice changes? Have you got the flexibility?
That's a really good question. We were expecting the response to the consultation, I think this week, weren't we? We were told by civil servants that we might see the consultation conclusion this week, but it's not appeared. So we wait to see that. One authority, I think, has not gone with what the government was saying, but is being challenged by the government for not following the 2014 figures. However, if there was change, as I said to you before, I would have liked to, I was trying to go to a lower number, because the commitment I gave was to get it as low as possible. And it was only when the government came out with their consultation that I can say this to you absolutely directly, that we had to go back to leaders, and the number had to. Everyone agreed that we weren't going to help anybody by putting out an unsound plan that just would be challenged and causing more chaos. But if those numbers came down, no, I would be seeking to revise our plan accordingly. So I say seeking because I always have to do it by agreement with 10 other leaders. But it's important for me to say to you that, as challenging as it was, the 11 of us did agree that this was the best way forward, given where we were. But if those figures change, then I would seek to revise the plan. And even if they don't change, I'm in the, as I say, I'm here today because I am prepared to listen and to change it, even within the confines of where we are. And I want brownfield first, or preference, to really mean something. And the reason why we might not be able to use as much brownfield as we would like is obviously linked to government funding. How much money will we have to clean up brownfield to make it viable? So it's the viable supply of brownfield land that is the issue. But I'm always looking at those issues, and I don't see this part of the exercise as being anything other than a genuine consultation to see if we can improve this thing even further still.
Did you want to ask the second part of that question?
Yeah. There's a supplementary part. Do you want to take that question first?
Yeah, which authority is it, Andy, that's being challenged by the government?
I think it's the Wirral. Yeah. I don't know whether they went out just before the government consulted, or...
I think they stated they were going to do it, and
come what may.
There's been quite a lot of discussion.
There's an issue here that, I think is probably one where we've got common ground, which is this figure that was in the government's manifesto, around 300,000. We feel that's arbitrary. We feel that's a manifesto figure, if you like. When politicians are like, they do this thing where they get big figures that are very neat and they're in manifestos. And it feels like, to us, things have been sort of then made to fit. Yeah. And so Paul Dennett, City Mayor of Salford, and I kind of wrote to the government, I think when we first got wind that this is what was kind of likely, to say, well, how, what's the working out here? And, aren't you just sort of making this fit the figure rather than being led by the evidence? We don't think we've ever had a reply with that letter. This was, when did we write? It was in the summer, I think. August 2018.
Yeah, you went public with it, didn't you?
I think it's public, yeah. So, but it's the Wirral that are the ones that are being challenged. All the other ones I mentioned have all kind of, we all had the same advice from the government. And obviously we can't ignore that, otherwise we...
Okay, can we just move on to Evelyn's second?
Wirral, yeah, but they're being challenged, yeah.
Okay, a further part on the numbers things. We're trying to delve into the background documents and understand how the numbers arose. Is it a baseline figure using the 2014 growth predictions, or is there an uplift for growth? We're trying to figure that one out.
Thought I was going to get away with this one. The government methodology takes the 2014 household projections as the baseline, and then we apply an uplift if there are affordability issues. So any area that has an affordability ratio of more than 4, which I think is 4 times the average salary, you then apply an uplift. Most of our districts apply a small uplift. Trafford and Stockport have the highest because they have the highest prices and the greater affordability issues. So the 201 figure we come up with, it obviously isn't just the household projections. There is an uplift for affordability, not for growth necessarily, but to try to address the affordable housing issues.
Does that answer your question, Evelyn?
We do spell that out in the SHMA, so you might, the Strategic Housing Market Assessment, but if it's not clear, get back to us, but we do try to set the steps out.
What we're trying to figure out is whether the accelerated growth scenario that was so strongly criticised in the first round, is that still there?
It is still there, but that only uses, that doesn't produce a population figure, that uses the subnational population projections as an input into it, so we're getting a lot of criticism from some other parties that we're not actually looking to increase our housing numbers to meet or drive economic growth, but actually there's not an enormous connection between them. The government actually disconnected the housing methodology from economic methodology and said you shouldn't be doing that. So we're not doing that. We're getting a lot from the development industry telling us we should be, but the figures, the uplift is around affordability, not around economic growth. What we have done, as we did last time, was, and again, this is a very big, I think, ambition of Greater Manchester, is we want the jobs that we're creating to be taken by Greater Manchester residents. So we've got some quite heroic assumptions around what the resident employment rate will rise to, which is linked to all of the upskilling of our residents and trying to make sure that people across the whole of the conurbation can actually benefit from this. So we're saying that actually the jobs we're creating, we've got the labour force currently in GM, it's just that a lot of them perhaps are not in employment, and we want to bring them into employment rather than relying on people migrating to Greater Manchester for the jobs. So that's in the employment paper, if you should explain that point.
Okay, can I just clarify, you said that there's an uplift at Stockport, so there's an uplift in the housing number at Stockport?
For affordability.
For affordability,
yeah.
But Stockport have then moved 5,000 houses?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Okay, we've got a supplementary question from Mark Burton from Steady State Manchester. Thank you.
Hello. Yes, as we've seen, the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework uses 2 sources for its projections of the need to build. The government's housing targets, which we've dealt with just now, but also the projections on economic growth and employment growth from Oxford Economics. Oxford Economics offers 2 projections, baseline projection and accelerated growth scenario, see the economy growing by 39% and 59% respectively by 2035. Both of these are at the higher end of economic forecasts and well above those of the Office of Budgetary Responsibility. Yet the combined authority has picked the higher of the 2. You rightly blame the government for imposing the housing demand methodology. Why has the authority opted for the inflated projection from Oxford Economics, which means likely overestimation of the space needed for offices, warehouses and industry?
There has been not just housing land that has been reduced in this plan. We have made a pretty significant reduction in the employment land take. And you probably help me with it.
2 million square metres.
Yeah, so we haven't just gone with the same allocation for employment that we had in GMSF 1. This GMSF makes a significant reduction. Obviously, we have high ambitions for the city region and growth, and we're not accepting defeat with Brexit, if I could put it that way. Because even if we're entering a more challenging period economically, many of our councils still have high ambitions for what they would want to achieve, and our ability to attract inward investment. So, this is part of the balance that has to be struck here. The need for jobs, but particularly higher quality jobs, is something that we can't just kind of back away from and say that we're not in that space. We are in the process of agreeing a local industrial strategy with the government. So by the end of March, we will have a document that we hope, well, there's other things being agreed by the end of March, so whether it will be done to that timescale, I don't know, but I would hope it will be done by then or shortly after. And that will set out our ambitions around quality jobs in industries that we all agree might have real growth potential. And they could be advanced manufacturing, materials, health innovation. We've done a lot of evidence gathering around our potential to grow those sectors, and consequently our GMSF is obviously becoming an enabling document for that keeps the ambition. At this stage, I'll be honest, I've not wanted to downgrade that ambition. I've not wanted to admit defeat, if you like, in saying that, oh well, we're not going to be growing at that level for the next 20 years. We don't know yet, do we, how the future is going to play out. We're still in a very uncertain certain time. But I do think I have to have high ambitions for people's employment in Greater Manchester. I have to have that, and I won't back away from that. But it's about balancing that then with people's natural environment, and that is where we've got to. But I would just say that there was a significant reduction in employment land take between GMSF 1 and GMSF 2.
Okay. This is a question that I'm going to ask. Given the uncertainty in the population projections over the long term, would a shorter plan period avoid the risk of unnecessary Greenbelt release? Alternatively, could the plan be phased so that no Greenbelt is released initially, but potential allocations are earmarked for release only if shown to be necessary after a review during the life of the plan?
Now, that's a really good question, and Anne is probably, again, it's a
all
technical one that the politician on the panel will start to struggle with. But I'm going to say that I think that is in effect what the plan does, in that obviously it is a brownfield preference policy upon which the plan is based, and the release of Greenbelt, as I understand it, is contingent upon the viable land supply being taken first before that comes into play. Now, if I've got that wrong, I apologise, and I'll ask Anne to come in and correct it. But personally, that's how I think it should be done. That it's definitely not greenfield first. Brownfield preference needs to be as strong as we can possibly make it as the guiding policy for this plan.
In terms of plan period, I think this comes up in quite a few discussions. So this is a plan for Greater Manchester, but it's also a plan that will then provide the context for all of the local plans across the 10 districts. So for Greater Manchester, we need to have a plan that gives us 15 years supply of land, definitely 10, preferably 15, but also for the districts, when this plan's adopted, it has to give them a 15-year supply, otherwise they'll have to go through all of this again, and I think none of us want that. We want this to provide this strategic context, and then the local plans come along and look at what the detail of that means for the districts. So we've got a 19-year plan period at the moment, and if we get to adoption by 2021, which is what we're aiming to do, 2020, 2021, that feels a very long time away for probably all of you. That's very, very short in my time scales, and probably quite ambitious that we will get through what I'd imagine would be quite a long public examination to get to that point. That gives districts 16 years if they're ready to go at that point. So actually shortening the plan period will make it quite difficult for local plans to come along afterwards. What Andy set out in terms of brownfield preference, what we want the plan to do, and if you look at the trajectory of housing, we're actually seeing all of the Greenbelt sites come forward, or the vast majority at the end of the plan period, because they have a lot of infrastructure that we want in. So there is a trajectory, I think, in the housing topic paper that shows that is absolutely dependent on us getting our brownfield land developed at a faster rate than currently we are. And last year was the highest number, particularly for housing, that we've had since 2008, so we built 9,000 homes last year. If we keep up at that rate, it means we can resist the Greenbelt sites coming forward first, because we can demonstrate our brownfield sites are being delivered, and that's what we want our plan to do. Some of that is then dependent on further discussions with government, and I think around funding for brownfield land, remediation of brownfield land. We have got serious viability issues with some of the post-industrial legacy on some of our sites, and it is difficult to say that they will come forward with that help, but we're working on that.
It's a really good explanation, Alan, and I just want to add, I think obviously where we've got disagreement we need to carry on discussing that and working through it, but where we've got common cause, I think we would like to harness the power of this group to help us make arguments to the government, because we had a situation recently where Homes England allocated many billions of pounds of housing infrastructure investment, 80% of which went to London and the South East. There were only 3 local authorities north of the M62 that qualified for the higher rate of infrastructure investment. They were Trafford, Harrogate and somewhere else. So one of our authorities qualified. And it is disgraceful, someone said it, it is, because we're talking, it was about £7 billion, and 80% of that £7 billion is basically, if you look at the map, it goes, because it's all been driven by affordability and house prices rather than need. Now, if we were to challenge that, obviously we would unlock more funds to clean up more brownfield, and then really the logic of our plan would really hold. You see what I mean? Because we would have funding coming through to take some of those difficult sites and then make them fit for development. And I kind of feel, as well as, let's say, continuing the discussion where we don't agree, let's also think where we do agree, and then sort of turn the power that you have as organisations representing communities across Greater Manchester and challenge some of those funding decisions, because I don't feel that those decisions are defensible, and I am worried that they won't allow us to unlock all of the brownfield sites that we would want to, because obviously the quicker we can do that, the more we do protect the Greenbelt.
Okay.
Just very quickly on that point, and again the point that your colleague made there, is that the idea of the plan is that we'll use the brownfield first. Yeah. But in reality, what we're seeing on a local level, the individual councils, we're getting developers knocking on the doors of people who's living in those areas. They're planning, they're drawing fancy plans up, showing much greater detail than you show in yours, which is their perspective. They are banging on the door to get onto the green fields. They're not queuing up to go onto the brownfield, being cleaned or not. And that's what we're seeing at a local level. So how can the plan control, or how can you control individual councils and developers to say, there we are, that's where we're going?
I'm with you. I mean, I think that's what we want to happen. We want to strengthen the position of councils against, if that is unwanted development and it doesn't have the support of elected representatives, we want to empower councils to resist development of that kind, where they effectively, they're ignoring the plan of the GMSF and they're going for a greenfield first, as I've always
100%.
I've always said that. I don't support that. But their ability to resist that is linked to what Anne was saying before and what I was just saying, the viability of the brownfield that's been identified in the plan. Because if you can demonstrate it's viable and numbers will be coming forward in those places, you're in a stronger position then to resist some of the speculative developers who then try and pile the pressure on to unlock these sites. So, I realise how unsettling that is, but that is, the industry's been kind of trying to run rings around everybody, hasn't it, and put pressure on individual councils. If we can together hold to the logic of this plan and make it work, that is in the end the best way of resisting the people who are behaving in the way that you describe.
These brown sites need to be dealt with at one point though, surely.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I've always said, the idea that we have decaying town centres surrounded by urban sprawl, it's not a vision of Greater Manchester that I'm prepared to sign up to. I want to see those town centres, many of them have large brownfield sites. I can think of a number in Rochdale, I can think of a number in Lee. You know, we want to see those places developed first, but obviously some of them are highly expensive in terms of the contamination that is on those particular
so I
sites.
just want to bring that to a close. I know, Chris, did you have a point quickly?
Just a quick point. Some of us in different boroughs, we're from Bury, but we don't have a lot of brownfield sites left because they've been developed, and one just recently has been very quickly rushed through for industrial use. We just want to know how there needs to be something in the GMSF about forcing the brownfield, exactly as the gentleman said. At the moment there's nothing, and a lot of the landowners have already been made lots of offers, and for us, we don't have a lot of brownfield left. We've been developed out already, other than what's left with our greenfield sites. So we're going to be massively hit by this, and the infrastructure isn't there, which is one of the main problems. But we just want to know, really, that there really needs to be something concrete in the GMSF that forces that to be used. Maybe that's the wrong term.
I'm no expert in planning policy, and you know, I've learned a lot about planning with Anne's kind of expertise. I would like to make the brownfield. I would like brownfield preference to be as strong as it possibly can be. You know, that's what I've been asking for all the way through. The point is, it can only be as strong as you can point to how viable that supply is, isn't it? You know, if it doesn't produce the numbers, then it loses its force. But I mean, my preference would be to make it as strong as we could possibly make it legally, to resist the kind of scenario that the gentleman painted a moment ago.
One last quick point.
We really need to get through this. I'm on page 2, and we've got.
You said go on to your local councils will have a plan after this one's done. Well, our local council destroyed its local plan and voted to back the GMSF. And whenever we talk to the council planners, they just turn around and tell us they are the GMSF. And they said that in a public meeting last week. So I fail to see the point of what the local plan is actually going to do. We're a bit lost on this now. You're telling us that there's going to be local plans, and but our council's saying no, we are the GMSF now.
Yeah. Do you know, I've said
my understanding is, I mean, Bury are working on preparing a local plan that will come along sort of a stage after every time we go out with GMSF, so the next time they will go out with the first stage of their plan. But I think when they're saying we are GMSF, that will set out the scale and distribution of development for Bury. It will give them their development figures, but the plan will have an awful lot more detail around how local policies apply, particularly environmental policies. I know there are particular issues there around River Valley policies that they speak to me about quite often, but there'll be a lot, you know, much more around type and mix of housing, affordable housing at a local level. So there's an awful lot, because GMSF, although you may think very long, actually is very high level. It is very strategic and has to be strategic. It can't have a lot of detail in, but the local plans do need to actually set out how that applies at a local level.
Right, can we just move on now, because I'm trying to get everybody's questions in. Right, M35 Save Our Greenbelt. They want to ask their question. Keep it succinct, please.
That's right. Andy, what have you firstly done to challenge the vastly overinflated targets set by the government? Because if we were to go off the census figures, you wouldn't have to build on Greenbelt.
So I described the letter that Paul and I wrote, which was last August. We did put a response to the consultation where we made the same points. I won't go into all the details today, but I've had discussions with government MPs to say to them, you know, why are you kind of sticking to this 300,000 figure? Can you not prevail upon ministers to get a more realistic, and to get it down to a figure that we would all probably feel is, you know, as I say, I'd rather it was a little lower. You know, I mean, obviously got to be guided by the evidence, but I didn't like the idea that we were kind of inflating to an arbitrary target, which it still feels a little bit to me like that is what is happening.
They've got this 300,000 figure, and it's kind of, you know, make the evidence fit the figure kind of thing is what it feels like. And so I said, well, can't you challenge that approach? I said I'm not going to name names, so I don't think it would be fair to them for me to do that because they were private conversations. But that is what I was, because I had anticipated the way this was going. And this was a point where Anne and the team, at my request, were working towards that aim of no net loss. But that basically evaporated when the government consultation landed. So I did personally put some effort into it.
Do you think you did enough? I mean, writing letters and stuff is one thing.
No, I just told you I did more than that.
Lobbying.
No, I just told you I did more than that. I mean, I'm not the government. You know, I can't tell you, you know, that they've got the access to ministers. I made those points to them, so I did more than write letters. And I can say to you, directly look you in the eye and say, I was working to that lower aim.
So these local MPs you're talking to, and what was their feedback then? I mean, you can't name names. But...
Yeah, I asked them to raise the concern that I had with the government. They told me they would, but when I saw the consultation, it didn't appear it had any effect. So it wasn't the case that I didn't do anything. I can promise you I did, and I'm sure that the team will confirm that I was working, particularly when the ONS came out, to a lower figure. We were talking to the leaders about what is now an appropriate figure, given what the ONS have said and given what our ambitions were, and we were having that discussion and that debate, and it was lower than where we are now. But when the consultation came out, the general feeling amongst the group of leaders was, we can't now, we would not be credible if we went out with a figure that just ignored what the government have just said. So that is just, I'm just giving you honestly what happened. And I don't want you to be direct, but you did ask me in that way, and I may as well give you a direct answer. I did more than just write letters.
Okay, we need to move on. I'm really sorry. Just at the end, if we've still got time, because we've got loads of questions to get through. Bury have got some of their planners and council leader is going. Is the council leader?
Our council leader, our opposition leaders, we've got a cross-party support, as well as our MPs, who are arranging a visit to London to see the housing minister, to get him to acknowledge the use of the 2016 figures. Will you support this? And can we get the other MPs around the areas to support it as well?
We've got 28 MPs across GM. If we can get some support from them to go to this meeting to say, can you have a look at the figures, would that be something that would be helpful?
Well, the consultation I think is over, is it not? I mean, I think, as I say, we were expecting to get the government's plan yesterday, we were told, and I don't think it appeared. Just being straight with you, what a meeting would achieve at this point, I don't know, because it sounds to me like they're about to publish it any day. But I'm not saying I disagree with what Rishi is saying. We, as I said, I made these points from the summer onwards, publicly and then privately to people in Parliament. So I'm not against sort of like trying. I'm just saying to you, realistically, I don't know if it can achieve much, because we're beyond the consultation, and I think it's imminent, the confirmation of the figures now. Westminster's a bit of a mystery even to me right now in terms of what's going on down there. So possibly, I don't know, it might help, but I'm just being honest, putting a health warning on it and saying I kind of feel we're almost beyond that point.
But would you support the effort?
Yeah, because I have done to this point, and I was supportive of a lower figure. That's where I was. And the government consultation changed everything. Okay. So, but I'm just being honest with you about whether or not what the likelihood of that being effective is all I would say.
Everybody goes as a joint. If everybody goes as a joint, surely we cannot ignore. This is a democratic world, isn't it? If every council
As I say, I'm not sure what's going on down there. Well, you you would, I don't know, you know, you would think so, but I mean, if it produced change, I'm not sure it would produce dramatic change, you know, because I think ONS have even qualified some of what they said. So I'm just, yes, in an ideal world, if you could mobilise with other people, and I'm saying to you, I'm not against what you're trying to do. I'm just being honest about where they are. They seem to have a view, a very strong view, that they want to stick to that 300,000 figure, and you know, then all of this kind of methodology obviously supports that approach. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm definitely not saying that. I'm just being honest about where it would be, what effect it would have. It might have a modest reduction, I don't know, but you know, it's unclear to me what's, you know, to the extent to which ministers are really engaged in this at the moment. It feels to be quite more civil service driven.
Okay, yeah, right, we're going to stick to the script from now on, everyone, okay? So, Woodford, who's got a question?
On behalf of all the groups, really. You talk about jobs and high-tech jobs, high-skilled jobs, which seems very laudable, but there's a worry about the amount of warehousing that's proposed on Greenbelt, when that actually is small numbers of low-paid jobs. It's also near roads, it generates traffic, and particularly heavy goods vehicles. So I wonder how we justify that approach.
Yeah. This was one of the big criticisms I made of GMSF 1. It was nowhere near ambitious enough from my point of view with regard to industry. And so that was one of the challenges that I put back to the councils. It placed way too much emphasis, in my view, on warehousing and distribution. I suppose, to put their point of view for a moment, they would say, let's take a borough that I know well, Wigan or Bolton. They would say, okay, well, it's all very well you saying we want advanced manufacturing, but realistically, we need jobs for people here, and you know, the M61, the M6 are places where people will come to for jobs. So, you know, there's a realism test, I guess, as well, that you've got to apply alongside the ambitions that you would like for higher quality jobs around Greater Manchester. So it's all of these things, and the whole GMSF process is a question of balance, isn't it? This industrial strategy isn't a kind of PR exercise. It's got to be quite an honest exercise based on where could Greater Manchester truly seek to gain a reputation in what you might call world-leading technology. And as I said before, it's likely to come out that we will have a genuine shout to be world-leading in advanced materials and manufacturing, health innovation, digital and tech, and creative industries. Those are probably the four, I would say, that are, and possibly green, zero carbon construction and green economy. So those are the kind of areas that we're looking at the moment. And I kind of said when, you know, on that event, the 7th of January event, when we launched the new plan, you know, for Media City, Sports City, Airport City today, I do want to be thinking Graphene City, Tech City, Health City in the future. We do want to try and identify geographical locations that could become centres for a cluster of industries in those sectors. Now, I wouldn't want to overclaim or anything at this stage, but the plan is trying to balance jobs we know we could get with ones that we would really want in the future, and that's where we've got to. And the reduction in employment land has reduced the take for warehousing and distribution.
Okay, right, so we're going to have Simon King next, who's going to ask a question on the Northern Gateway proposal.
Yes, so with regards to the Northern Gateway proposal, you've got 3 councils proposing stuff for that, a 2-mile radius. So you've got 5,000 homes, which are going to be spread across 350 acres of Greenbelt land along. Hayward Road is also the main route of all these developments, and it's one of the most polluted roads in Greater Manchester alone. So why such a huge concentration in one area?
Well, it's been a long-held ambition of Greater Manchester to deal with our own north-south divide, because there is a north-south divide in Greater Manchester in terms of where development and prosperity is, and it's more concentrated in the south than it is in the north. So that's where the thinking has come historically, that predates me, around the northern gateway. The issues I was just touching on are very relevant to this site. You know, that people would see it not as just distribution, but it could be a centre for. It's been suggested to me, you know, if graphene has mass production potential, it could be thought of as a potential candidate. But there will be other ideas as well. And the idea is that it does become a major centre for not just for housing but for employment as well. In terms of pollution, we did say on the 7th of January that all of this needs to be considered alongside our clean air proposals for Greater Manchester. The recommendation that we'll likely make to the government is that we want a Category C clean air zone, which obviously would mean that the most polluting lorries, vans, buses, taxis wouldn't be able to operate in Greater Manchester. So the pollution side of things would be dealt with by our clean air proposals. The congestion, maybe not. So that's why I was saying at the beginning that if groups want to set up working groups around transport with TFGM, I will absolutely facilitate those arrangements.
The traffic along on Hill Road is mainly congestion each morning. It's a knock-on effect of traffic going into Manchester City Centre via Middleton Road, and the same Sinister Island junction improvements, but it's not Sinister Island that you need to concentrate on. It's traffic going inbound into Manchester City Centre.
Well, I don't disagree with that, and I would personally be looking to prioritise this area for significant transport investment. There has been talk of extension of Metrolink in this area. That's what I mean when I say I would like localised working groups to really think through the transport requirements based on the local knowledge that you have.
Agreed with that with the Metrolink, but for instance, Hayward Road is about a mile away from the proposed Metrolink. There's also another one at Baker Vale, and we're still seeing high traffic levels. Now, Baker Vale is available there for you, so.
No, so I agree with you, but that's why I want you to shape. Those plans aren't fixed, you know. Yeah. The offer I'm trying to make to you all today is, I want those to be more locally driven, rather than just dreamt up at TFGM, and then you do a very good job, by the way. But I think if they are more locally driven, we'll probably end up with better transport plans. Yeah. I think the whole conurbation needs a much greater emphasis on park and ride around the M60, with proper park and ride facilities to facilitate that. I think transport-wise, we're nowhere near where we should be, if we're honest. And we need some really radical rethinking of transport in Greater Manchester.
Yeah, we'll discuss it further on that group anyway. So.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to move on. So questions need to be kept concise and also answered, please.
It was Anne's that no.
Right, so next is Slatters. You want to ask a question?
Well, you actually answered them, but I'll make another point. Why do you not actually do the infrastructure before you do any of this? I mean, for me, it's a crucial point. The whole of the Greater Manchester is in gridlock. If you take what the gentleman was saying, if you take Sinister, we're going east to the M62, you take us, which is Slattock Stakehill, and then you take them to Rochdale, you're putting all that stuff on the motorway, you're just going to gridlock the whole area. But you're doing it all around the orbital. Should you not be doing the infrastructure, spending the money on the infrastructure and the brownfield, then come and have this argument in 10 years' time? Do you not think that's logical?
Yes, yes I do. I know it doesn't help anybody when I agree with you, because I actually see it totally from your point of view, and I made exactly the same point myself in response to GMSF 1 during the mayoral election campaign. There wasn't a convincing infrastructure plan to support it. So I tried to correct that by asking TFGM to publish
the 5-year delivery plan that supports this draft of the GMSF. Why is it done in this way though, the way you're saying, you'd be saying to me, well hang on, do the infrastructure first, which I fully, and I would by the way. I don't want this session to sound like, oh it's all the government, it's all the government, because actually all governments have neglected transport investment in the north of England, all of them, my own included, the one I was in. But the reality is they don't come offering us big cheques for infrastructure. We have to prize every bit we get out of them. And I have some funding from the government through something called the Transforming Cities Fund, which is behind that the TFGM plan. And that though would be then, because we're doing a strategic approach with the GMSF, that allows us to then get developer contributions to then get more for our money, if you like, in terms of the infrastructure investment. So that's what I'm trying to offer you today, that if there is to be development, I think we need to have a very detailed conversation with communities where that development is to get as much transport investment of the right kind so that we can make it work as best as possible. In an ideal world, we would just be putting that infrastructure in now, but we don't have the money to do that.
So you're saying post-development?
No, it would be, as those schemes come forward, as happens, with any development, it's often that the transport is done at the same time. It will be simultaneously. So it obviously has to be. That's part of the detailed consideration of schemes as they come forward. But it would be that developer contributions come into the new Metrolink, the new Park and Ride, or whatever it might be. So it would be a process that happens at the same time, preferably in advance. So I've got some money allocated, £75 million in 23-24, and I'm hoping that that level of funding will continue in the years after. So there is some funding, but I have to be quite adept at how we use that money and get the maximum return for that funding. And it's going to be a case of sort of at the same time probably, because the developer contributions would be needed to make some of those schemes add up.
Okay, so we've got friends of Carol Boyce. Okay, so Carol's question. Thank you.
Well, I was expecting to follow somebody else who was talking about air quality, but in the meantime I'll talk about it. So it all sounds wonderful. However, we're on the other end of this situation now, where we actually have a development going on, where there has been absolutely no due diligence whatsoever about traffic. It's already gridlocked. 662 new parking places are not going to make any significant difference, apparently, to the traffic in our local area, which is a single access down narrow roads in a small estate.
And where is that?
That is over in South Swinton. So we're already suffering that. Well, what's a bigger issue for us is the whole air quality issue, which you say you've got this wonderful plan coming up. What's not being considered in all of this, besides what happens afterwards when 662 cars start trying to get down our narrow roads, is what's happening now during the development itself, where we've been monitoring our own air quality, and I can tell you on our estate it's gone up 112%, and it's now 44.26, which is already over the standard. We're breathing that for the next 4 years. So there's all kinds of levels at how to approach this green space. You guys are just at the beginning of it. This is what it's like at the end. There's no due diligence done by the developers, and in our case, Salford City Council accept their figures when they've got tens of millions of pounds on the table at stake if they don't get their application through. So what are you going to do to help that situation?
I mean, that's not part of the GMSF, so obviously there's a limit to what I can do, because that's really a local.
It should be, because it will be.
But existing development, no, really, because obviously that's been agreed. That goes back 5 years or whatever. The planning.
We have 5 months into this, Andy. 5 months.
But the plan, also, sorry, I'm not trying to avoid the question, but the planning consent for it obviously started way back, didn't it? Going back probably
Yes,
what?
do you want me to tell you how it happened? I won't bore this meeting with it, but I'll tell you all later.
I mean, there's no point in me standing before you and telling I can do things about things that I obviously don't have no remit over because.
I think the point is about air quality.
Yeah.
That's
So
the
the
answer to the question about air quality.
So the answer is
In Great Manchester.
what I said before about a Category C clean air zone. That isn't like far off. You know, we might get round to it. That would have to be in by 2021. Now, it may not immediately address your problem, so I'm not going to claim that it would, but it would address the point was made about Northern Gate, you know, every other community represented in terms of potential future
Is that across the
development.
whole of Greater Manchester?
Yeah. The proposal is that
literally from the border, because we're at 62% of 40 at the moment. You've got to put another 500 houses now, another 1,000 homes onto an A6 that is congested in the morning, about 2 hours every morning, and you stick another 1,000 homes on there. Those lorries go straight onto the new road, out to the airport. We're anywhere near Greater Manchester because we're in Cheshire. But we're not, we're in Greater Manchester. You know, High Lane is just left on a limb every single time.
Yeah.
Well, the answer is yes. I mean, that's what we're proposing. For the reason that you just gave, actually. Because if we'd have just made it M60, we would potentially have displaced more traffic into the gap between the Greater Manchester border and the M60 perimeter. So we, you know, in discussion, we weren't prepared to do that. And because Highways England haven't been helping us with this at the moment, they've been saying that they don't want to be part of any clean air zone, but we've gone back to the government and said they have to be. They can't claim that they're outside of our border because they cause most of our traffic problems, to be honest. So no, it's a plan that covers the entire. Well, this is the proposal anyway, and that would relate to, as I said, lorries, vans, buses, taxis, and we're looking at 2021. So it's not in the distant horizon. This is coming down the track very, very quickly.
Yeah, great. We're moving on to Newhay and Milne Row. Next question. So we've missed a couple of questions out there just because they've been answered, so we don't want to go over the same thing. So nice and short, everyone.
Thank you very much.
I get the message.
Hi everyone, hi Andy. Hi. Newhay and Milne Row are mid-sized villages at the foot of the Pennine Hills, with the M62 dissecting our communities. We're in the borough of Rochdale, but on the border of Oldham. The Greenbelt land in between these towns is in GMSF. So our point is, in places like Rochdale, there are lots of dilapidated old buildings in the town centre. The council have not included anything in the framework, but have identified a separate consultation, reimagining Drake Street. Is this really joined up thinking? The question is, why hasn't the town centre been included as part of the strategic plan?
And we'll, again, on this one probably know more than me. I think the answer is the level of contamination. The sites would require many. If I'm thinking of the same sites that you are, I think what was it Turner Brothers?
Town centre. Drake Street. Drake Street is shops, old dilapidated shops.
Yeah, I know. But there's a site at the top of it, isn't there?
The retail park?
The old Turner Brothers is up Scotland, which is about a mile outside the town centre.
Okay, I'm thinking of the site. Apologies if I got my geography a little bit wrong here, but the old fire station, the Metrolink, if you walk down towards the town centre, there's a major site there, isn't there? Yeah. And I think I thought that was Turner Brothers, no?
No.
It was about a mile outside the town.
So what was that one that I'm thinking about?
That was an MFI, it was an old cinema.
But before that, I'm told anyway that some of the sites in Rochdale Town Centre, because I've asked the question, are highly contaminated and would require a lot of money to make them viable. Might be wrong. Well, I may be standing corrected on that.
Can I just maybe clarify that? All of it, in terms of the plan, it is the plan is looking at, and your focus, I understand, is on the Greenbelt sites, but they are a very small proportion of the land that is being proposed for development. So all of the sites that the lady mentioned in the town centre are actually included within our baseline land supply, there are viability issues with them, but we have got them in there, and we are saying they are the sites we would like to come forward first. We do reference the importance of town centres, and we talk a little bit about Town Centre Challenge, but the sites are in as part of our baseline land supply. We have published all of the information about the baseline land supply, and if you look at that and you think we've missed any sites, we did this last March and we didn't get any new sites in, but all of the brownfield land, even where we know there are significant viability issues with it, we are including within and saying we still want that to come forward, and we want that to come forward first, but we're not ignoring it, we haven't discounted it because of the problems. It is counted, and as part of that we've identified about 181,000 land for about 181,000 homes. So it is included in the plan. Town centre is a really important part of Rochdale's proposals, but they will be taking most of that through their local plan. But we are counting all of those sites that you've mentioned and that other people have mentioned are in the baseline land supply. If you look and some of them aren't, let us know that as part of the consultation.
It's not technically, sorry to interrupt, it's not technically the brownfield sites that we're talking about, it's the fact that the town centre has died, and they're trying to reimagine it, and they're asking, there's a consultation out about reimagining how it could look, but that's not part of this overall housing number.
Well, it is if we already know about it. If as part of that more housing numbers come forward, we take those into account as part of the next review, and we are hoping that through Town Centre Challenge we've seen significantly more numbers in our town centres in this plan than we did in the last one. So we've got about 2,000 units in Oldham, we've got 3,000 in Bolton, 3,000 in Stockport.
Nothing in Rochdale.
There are some in Rochdale, but not many. But if this work and I think that's coming through the Town Centre Challenge project, if that generated options or propositions for housing, we would certainly be looking at those as part of the next plan. But we have been working with Rochdale around Town Centre Challenge and the work they're doing, so we are connected to that work.
Okay.
Just very, very briefly to say, I want to see much more residential development in town centres. That is my wish. I think that is the best way to rethink the future of some of our proud Lancashire towns, former Lancashire towns. And the Mayoral Development Corporation that we're establishing in Stockport would be an option that's available to other boroughs, were they to ask me to do it. But of course it has to come from the council concerned.
No chance then.
Sorry?
No chance then.
Well, I would imagine Bolton might be interested because they've got a big town centre plan, and they want more residential in the town centre. I would hope my former constituency of Lee might be a candidate for that because there's some big sites there. Obviously, that's obviously the reason I'm mentioning to you. It's obviously for you, isn't it, to speak to local councillors.
What is a mayoral fund? What does it do?
A Mayoral Development Corporation is a sort of new vehicle that we get from having a combined authority and a mayor. Basically, it is a special planning vehicle that allows you to designate a particular area, and in doing that, you can expedite planning, you get compulsory purchase powers. In effect, it allows you to sort of take a place-based approach, if you know what I mean, rather than allowing town centres suffer from the fact that development can be quite piecemeal and fragmented. We are going to be the first place in the country that will use a Mayoral Development Corporation for a town centre, and that will be the Stockport experience that we're about to go through. And I think it offers quite a lot of potential to maximise housing numbers in town centres. But here's the point: should other local councils wish to take it up, I can't impose a Mayoral Development Corporation in law. It has to come from a request from the council concerned. But Stockport, you know, having really thought through how they minimise Greenbelt take, have come forward with very ambitious plans for town centre regeneration. And it's a new idea here, but they think town centre living is a viable option for Stockport. And if we prove it there, then I would like the other towns in my town centre challenge, Stalybridge, Farnworth, Stretford. We would then start to open it up elsewhere. But it's got to be driven, if you like, by the local authority. I can't impose it.
Okay, super. So I was going to ask a question, but I don't want it to be an open...
Can I just ask?
No.
About
You can ask at the end. I'm going to ask this question now, and it's going to be a yes/no, because I don't want it to be an open-ended question, and it's about brownfield sites. Basically, it was, we understand they need to be deliverable in order to be suitable for development. Residents can't assess that. It has to obviously be assessed by the powers that be. There's a potential army of people that could go out and assess these areas in a systematic fashion to put them onto a brownfield register. But we have had confirmation at Berry's meeting that it isn't actually the brownfield registers that will be assessed at examination, it's the Sheilas. So from the
strategic housing and employment and availability.
So in terms of that then, so brownfield registers aren't going to be useful at examination. How often do Sheilas get updated with brownfield from the brownfield register to the Sheila?
On an annual basis.
Right, annual.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
She's very regular.
Yeah. Yes.
She's good at Sheila.
She is very good. Super. Right, so we're moving on to Apethorn and Bowlaker, which is...
Well, good afternoon, Andy and Anne. I'm sure you remember me from the same side one.
I do.
Yeah. Right, where to start with this one? I would like to ask what the exceptional circumstances were in this specific case and generally. What are the criteria to remove the exceptional circumstances, to remove the Greenbelt status from these pieces of land? You know, we've got a document, GMG11, that backs up the fundamental principles of the Greenbelt. And I would like to know why these sites have not benefited from that. And whilst I'm on the subject of this is something I've been in correspondence with Anne with, a lot of the data set that's been used to establish that these sites are actually the ones to be chosen are based on evidence that the urbanisation and the grade 3 agricultural land basis the data is wrong. So if these documents have been produced on the basis of the GMOD map, land use maps, surely it calls into question the criteria for selecting these sites. Now, this is only just starting to emerge, so this is something I would like to pursue with you, that if the data that is being used to establish the sites and the figures is based on false information, when do we go back and revisit that? You know? I'll leave it at that. I'll be brief and leave it at that.
Well, I think they're really important points. Anne will probably know a little more about the detail on the grade 3 agricultural land. I think those are powerful points for the consultation, aren't they?
Yes.
And that's why we're here today. I mean, please understand me. Well, the reason we are here is because we want to listen to evidence like that we put into the consultation. On your point about the exceptional circumstances, I mean, I would say it's the housing crisis is the exceptional circumstances. I mean, we have to build more homes. Now, I've been on the record as saying, if you go via a green field first or over reliance on Greenbelt, you're unlikely to solve the housing crisis, in my view. And it's why, alongside this GMSF, we produced a new housing vision for Greater Manchester that the City Mayor of Salford developed, which says that we will develop 50,000 truly affordable homes to our definition, 30,000 of them social rented, as part of this whole plan. Now, you could probably argue the extent to which Greenfield release homes that truly deal with the housing crisis, but the housing crisis just isn't at the very low affordable end. There's obviously a need for more homes at every level of the housing market. So that's probably what in law people would cite. Anne, do you want to add anything?
Just very quickly, we have set out the case for the exceptional circumstances in the Greenbelt topic paper, so have a look at that. I know we are in dialogue about the particular data set you're talking about, and I think maybe if we continue that outside of the meeting, and if where we get to, it is a national data set. So,
I would like to take a look on that one,
okay.
Can I just have one point that touches briefly on the point we didn't make? And at the last meeting, at the question and answer session, I did point out that there was an ideal site in the middle of Hyde that fulfills the requirement exactly for a regeneration of town centres. Full infrastructure is there. The full infrastructure is there. The site is there. All it needs is finance. Has anybody actually undertaken what the clean-up cost of this site will be? People just seem to pull a figure out of the air of £10 million. Where's that number come from? It seems to me that we've got a situation, I know I'm speaking of our local situation, but I'm sure this applies elsewhere as well. We have got, how are we going to make developers choose these sites? One thought that just occurred to me now, why can we not load the Greenbelt Greenfield sites with a higher contribution to the infrastructure and use that money to clean up the brownfield sites and make them more attractive for developers?
We are putting a lot of infrastructure requirements on the Greenbelt sites. I mean, that is, you know, and we've hopefully given more detail this time. It's still quite high level because they're not designed to that degree yet, but there is an expectation, and the reason we've put the expectation about you will require a new primary school, you will require open spaces, to effectively say you need to take that into account when you're negotiating land value, so you don't come back to us and say the site isn't viable, I can do the housing but I can't put any of the infrastructure in. So that is exactly what we're doing through all of the policies. I think in terms of whether or not that would raise any additional value to reinvest elsewhere, I think we would like to think it does, but actually some of the infrastructure costs are really significant that we're asking for. But that is precisely what the policies do, because what we are saying to people, because they always come back to us at the planning application stage and say, actually, we paid too much for the land and we can't afford to do any of this, and we're saying that's not good enough. We're telling you very early on what the expectation would be. Sorry, I'm now...
I just want to make a very quick point to say that Hyde issue is definitely an issue to put into the consultation, and I'd just say it more generally to everybody. You know, issues about brownfield and the debate about how much it would cost to clean up, if people have any evidence about that, that is exactly the kind of evidence that should be put forward as part of this consultation, because you know the viability assessment that's been done might not be what fits with the evidence that you might have about some of those sites. So I would say that is a very productive place to really focus your attention.
And really quickly, sorry Zoe, is there anyone from CPRE here?
No.
Oh, because we're doing some work with CPRE about the Brownfield Toolkit, which I think is precisely what you're talking about. How do you and we get in to look at viability of those? So I think that's one piece of work. We're at a meeting with them in March, if any of you are at that meeting. That's looking at how do we collectively start to be able to look at...
Is that a meeting people could go to, is it?
I don't know, it's a CPRE, Paul and I
go to it. Paul, you're dealing, you've got quite good links to CPRE, so we'll talk to you about that. Yeah. Right, James, next question.
Nice, thank you for coming. Thank you for your staff time and everything. So my name's James Mason. I'm Chair of Safeguards Manchester's Greenbelt. So Andy, have you considered asking central government to grant you mayoral powers or Greenbelt planning, not unlike the London model?
I'm not familiar with what that is, to be honest with you. So no, could you explain?
So you can. If a council gets into dispute with a builder, rather than going straight to government, it'll go to the mayor.
Oh, sorry, I do know. I do know. Well, you know, I'm not against any devolution, to be honest, and I would rather we resolve things here than done in London. That's the whole reason I left Westminster, because you know I kind of feel that approach where big decisions that affect us are taken miles away is wrong, basically. So I wouldn't oppose that. Not at all.
You haven't actually done it.
No, I'll be honest with you. No, I've been dealing with other, I've had other priorities, but I think it's a fair challenge. It's just not been at the top of my list so far. I mean, we've obviously got a lot of big issues that we're dealing with, but I'm not against making an appeal to the government on those lines. I want the same powers that the Mayor of London has got, not for me, but for us, for GM to do more for itself.
Okay, yeah, super. Right, we've got Hart next.
Good afternoon. Hart are delighted to see the Bolton Council have no longer offered up the Hulton Park estate for housing development. But we want to know why the GMSF still support a golf course which will devastate what is not only Greenbelt, but Grade 2 listed park and garden, when there are already at least 18 golf courses, including driving ranges and academies, within a few miles of the estate, most of which are failing?
I mean, that's a question for Bolton Council, I would say, more than myself. I suppose the answer, I guess, I'll speculate in answer to the question. They wanted to host major golfing events there, I think, was the plan, wasn't it? Now, I don't know, I haven't seen whether that is viable, what the chances of that are. I do believe, myself, in having high quality space for sport and recreation, and that possibly, but I think if we look around Greater Manchester, whereas an Open Championship can go to Liverpool or Liverpool City region, do we have a golf course that could host one? Don't think so. So again, I apologise if it's not the answer that you want, but as Mayor of Greater Manchester, I want things to come and happen here that are, international events.
But this is removing working farms from that land. The tenant farmers on the land at the moment.
Well, I'm not saying I necessarily, I'm not really here to sort of comment. I'm just trying to give you the reason why. You asked me why is it in, and I think that is the reason. And then that is the debate that needs to be had. You legitimately say there are other uses of that land, which you've just touched on. Others might say, well, Bolton, we want to bring in international events into our council, into our area. So that is the debate, I guess, and the issue would be how likely and how viable is a golf course of that kind in the proposals that are being put forward. But I want to see those major events coming here. I wouldn't want to sort of suggest otherwise. So that's probably why it's in.
Okay, right, so we're going to move to no net loss. Pete, do you want to say this one?
I'll do, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I am doing that again. Andy, you make great play about the reduction in net Greenbelt take in the latest version of GMSF, and that's most welcome. The net reduction has been achieved in two ways. Firstly, by removing some of the Greenbelt land allocated in GMSF 1 for housing, and secondly, by adding in to Greenbelt land, which is not currently Greenbelt. Those are the two techniques. I make three comments on this. Some of the reduction in Greenbelt has been achieved by allocating to housing land which is not technically Greenbelt, but is long established, public open space, football pitches, etc. So it's not technically Greenbelt at the moment, but it's public open space, and you've made it Greenbelt, and you're adding that in as a part of your positive. Some of the land added into Greenbelt includes land which is already public and open spaces. And thirdly, some of the remaining Greenbelt which you've left is already built up. For example, in my patch, you've halved the Greenbelt and left large areas which are already built on, including 5 hectares of commercial greenhouses. I'm sure there's similar examples elsewhere, although I've not read all 28 documents yet.
But I mean, that was what I asked the team to do, to put under greater protection land that was cherished as Greenbelt but may not be Greenbelt. I mean, I did ask the team to do that so that it would have higher level of protection going forward, and other bits, if not reclassified as Greenbelt, have had an enhanced protection put on them. That was because the strategy here was to say, well, what we can keep, protect it more, and even enhance it further. That was the logic. The way you said we've achieved the reduction, there was a third way that we've achieved the reduction, which is higher density development in the urban centre and in our town centres. So that was another way in which we've achieved the reduction, which I think is right. And I would, as I was saying before, I would like to see it go even further, to be honest, if we could. So that's the process that we've been through. If you go back to my manifesto, I said radical rewrite. I said substantial reduction. That was the document that went to every home in Greater Manchester. In the longer manifesto that I had, I said I would work towards the aim of no net loss, because I didn't say that was a guarantee, because I knew I didn't have that. And at every hustings I spoke at, I always caveated it and said, because I knew it wasn't all within my power, But I hope Anne would confirm that that was the discipline that I asked Anne and her team to work consistent with what I said. And it was when the government's methodology came that I reluctantly realised that I couldn't anymore hold to that and produce a sound plan. So I just want you, to that's the examples you've given though. Please submit those as part of the consultation. Those specific examples, the greenhouses and the other things, and I will take a look at them.
Okay, super. So we're going to move on. Clarity of consultation. I just want to read your list of things that we've noticed about the consultation. So you don't have to respond. It's just something that we're going to put across to you. You can't zoom in and out, view street names, and get your bearings despite it being a PDF, so it's difficult to use. The maps are unclear. Areas are renamed, such as Kingsway South and G Cross, to give two examples, aren't accurately named. So when people look into their area, local knowledge, basically. Okay. Unless you've had the benefit of reading the plans in depth, you've no chance of understanding the proposals and, more importantly, voicing your objections. This suggests that the person who has responsibility for sites either has no understanding of the area or the plans are intentionally vague to confuse. Yeah. Online consultation, which precludes some sections of our community, so older people are really struggling with it. They can't, it's just inaccessible.
Older people. I think a lot of people are confused.
Well, yeah.
Even
so
technically,
I'm looking towards Rachel from our communications team, who was probably hoping to
just
escape.
to make a note.
Would you give us all of those examples, all of those things, and we will take them back.
Yeah.
And the communications team, working with Anne's team, will see if we can...
But it's too late, there's only 6 weeks left now. The people don't understand.
People need a plain plan.
Well, it's not too late, is it?
It's a 1,000-page document. Who has time to download
it? Is only 400 pages.
Oh, sorry.
Not
right, so can we agree? No. Can we agree that we're going to give those to the Mayor, to GMCA, and they can do with that what they need to do? But we are making the statement that that is how we
I think it's also important to say, is it not, Anne, that this isn't the last consultation, is it? Or is it?
No.
So there will be another one. Am I right?
But it is important that what we put in now as our comments
now
will
sure.
be picked up at public examination.
No, I agree with you.
So that's important.
I agree with you. We will take on board those points and we'll see if we can improve things. If there's more that can be done to facilitate people who are not online to contribute, I don't know if we can take that point on board at this stage.
We're accepting obviously responses in a multitude of ways, but ideally want to drive people as much as possible through the online platform, just so that things, that when comments are made, they're made against a site or a particular policy area, so it's actually clearer where you're intending your comment to go against.
Comment, you mean objection?
No.
All objections.
How will you treat?
I think someone is not.
Right, we're sticking to the plan. Sorry guys, I'm really sorry, but we are sticking to the plan. We're going to move on. CPO.
So sorry, before we move on, but you can send all your questions that you've got. We've already got additional questions, and we can
pass them over.
I've sent questions and I've had a very dismissive response
from GMCA.
And I think it's really important that if we are raising questions about the content of the document, given the size of them and the amount of time it's taking to get through to understand the detail, then we should at least have the courtesy of a response, not be told that you can't come back to us during the consultation.
No,
and I've written specifically to you.
I don't think I've seen that letter, but let me answer the question directly before we move on, because I know you want to move on. I would ask this forum to maybe give us a list of specifics, and then I will undertake to come on advice from the comms team and from Anne's team, say which we can do, which we can't do. And I appreciate the fact that it's, that you would say that it should have been like this at the beginning. I understand the point, but if that could be done as quickly as possible, we will come back to you with an answer on what we can do to enhance the simplicity of it.
Yeah.
But what is beyond us at this stage. So, and we'll do that.
Thank you.
No
We
problem.
already said on the last plan that the maps were clear, but nothing's improved this time.
let's see what we can get with how we go forward. Right, so this question is going to be, I've got 2 questions from Friends of Tangshut, and I'm going to just move on to the CPO question, maybe pick that up at the end if we can. So the question on CPO is, our group have been working across GM for 2 years on this project. We've seen 4th and 5th generation tenant farmers ousted by Peel, and many a new rural economy in GM threatened by proposals put forward. So I don't think you have a bigger appreciation of the rural economy that the GM has. So this is homes and businesses which are being targeted for development, as well as the loss of amenity for many residents who enjoy getting out into the countryside for hobbies and well-being. I've got an option agreement with me from a farmer who doesn't want to sell his land.
Yeah.
He's being pressured. They come in every other day and it's stacking up and stacking up. He doesn't know what to do. Because in these option agreements, they're saying, well, it could be for housing, or it could be for development, or it could be for infrastructure and needs CPO in. He doesn't know what to do. But he's not the only one in this situation.
Well, I don't want people in that situation. I don't think they should be in that situation, in my view. I don't think people should have pressure piled upon them. If it's their land that they've decided that they don't want to sell it, I would say that's that, myself. Now, I had raised this before. I didn't see how. I mean, I remember in GMSF 1, from a constituency point of view, there was land that was in that was not kind of under with the agreement of the landowner.
Yeah.
And I feel that's I find that problematic if that is being done, because I don't think that's, in my view, right.
Yeah.
If they have made it a clear view that they don't want to sell, that should be respected, in my view.
Right.
Would you commit to that, Andy? We're in the same situation, the majority. Is that something that you would commit to?
Well, if it's your land, and if you've decided not to sell, I find that a clear, I'm not talking from a legal planning point of view, I'm talking from an ethical point of view. If that is your clear decision, I think that should be respected.
Okay. Right, and then we've got Friends of Tangshut. So this is probably how we're doing for time.
We're over, but I know that Andy's kindly allowed, and thank you, Anne, for staying over, but I think Friends of Tangshut, and can we just go back to the no net loss?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to go back to no net loss first?
Yeah.
Right. What do you want to go back to on that?
Just maybe looking at the question with Peter, is that right?
Yeah.
Peter?
I mean, I've asked the question and
Oh, yeah.
sort of got an answer. But I think the point at issue is the fact that we've got a park, it's been a park for, since I won't say since time immemorial, but for many, many years, half a century, more than half a century. And that is now a park. It has all the defence of a park, a public park, with full public access, swings, and all the rest of it. And it is not, at the moment, technically Greenbelt. You then say, we'll make it Greenbelt, and I've now added that in to the Greenbelt amount, so that reduces the loss. And I think that is fundamentally dishonest. And
Disingenuous.
the other problem is the opposite way around, where we've got the land which is, you take the land out and not put land back in, and the whole thing becomes a bit of a mishmash in that the net loss is, I think, not honestly being calculated, and I'm sure this applies elsewhere.
Indeed, yeah. Well, thank you, and I do hear what you're saying. I mean, I personally would take a different view about recreation areas, because I would like them to have a higher degree of protection.
It isn't though, is it?
So,
you've taken the green belt.
No, if you're designating a place that's used by the community that isn't currently designated as green belt, that has green space within it, and you're placing it under green belt protection, I think that is the right thing to be doing, so that you are protecting a space that's used for children's recreation into the future.
Not to deduct from your agreement. It makes no effective difference. We've got a park.
Because it's not greenbelt, it's at more risk of development, isn't it?
Well, our Greenbelt's at risk of development, isn't it?
I've got a public park. The possibility of a developer coming in and building houses on a public park is so remote.
No, not really, no.
No,
it happens everywhere.
It has no more protection.
No, I can point you to many examples of where parks have been sold, and there's been big debates in Liverpool City region about this. You know, parks can be developed. They're not under. Many of them are not under Sport England playing field protection.
Liverpool just won there in the High Court, didn't they, to stop development on Calderstones Park?
Well, I say that there have been but there have been very contentious developments linked to public parks.
Right, okie dokie. Pete, does that...
All sorts of
What? Anything else that you've got? Put it in the list and we'll send.
I will do that.
Okay. Right, we've got Friends of Tangshut. So
where are they?
Right. So Friends of Tangshut. We've not got very long, so you need to ask a question.
The farmland question or the child safety question?
Whichever one you want.
Okay.
I'd rather do the farmland.
Right, this is something this side could really put people in Stockport off staying in the GMCF because it's got bad PR all over it, child safety issues. It could be another Swinton as well. A serious question on child safety. A place where all children are given the best start in life and young people grow up inspired to exceed expectations. The source is a vision for Greater Manchester from the GMSF. Question, if this is the case, then why are children on Cherry Tree, an area with known pockets of deprivation and health inequalities, going to have their well-used public park that they help fundraise for, built on, and their safe route to school through green space and clean air, swapped for a busy access road? And public park. And public park. And the farmers.
Okay.
Okay. That issue is something I take. I've got a lot of passion for children's recreation and green space. I don't know all of the details about that example, but I will take a look at it. So I can't really say much more than that at the moment, but I will.
It's renamed Hyde Bank Meadows.
Okay, let me get some advice about that. I don't like to see parks being built on as a general.
We can put that in our response. Okay, so the very last question that I am going to ask is, so this is going to be the last question, and it's going to be an affordable housing question, and it relates to the GMCA meeting 11th of the 1st. Paul Dennett said that 50,000 houses would be affordable under this plan, 30,000 for social rent. We've lost over 90,000 houses through right to buy, so does this go far enough to make up the shortfall? And what is the policy for making sure that housing in GM stays affordable so that we don't end up with a London-centric housing crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. So is it enough to undo the damage of right to buy? No. As you rightly say, we've lost 90,000 homes since the mid-80s. What this is, though, is something that we have considered we can actually do. You know, it's a viable number. It's not a kind of, I was saying about the sort of rounded up numbers, but actually, Paul, we can give you the working out as to how we would deliver this. One of the ways in which we would begin to do it is through the Greater Manchester Housing Fund. So the big buildings being built in the city centre. The loans that are being repaid on those buildings are creating a surplus, which is part of the money that we would now use to fund this commitment. Alongside the 50,000 commitment, there is a agreed drive to challenge poor standards in the private rented sector, and if necessary, compulsory purchase properties out of the private rented sector back into the social rented sector, where they are poorly maintained and are dragging down communities and putting the residents of those properties at risk. So Paul is leading quite a change actually in terms of our thinking on housing, and we would want to go further, but going further would mean fuller freedoms for our councils to build more council housing and funding, of course, than they currently have. But the 50,000 figure is one which has been carefully worked out according to the funding that's available to us. And as you rightly say, 30,000 of those homes would be socially rented.
That's great. Right, I think we're about to wrap up there. James, do you want to conclude the meeting? Is there anything else that you'd like to? Anything else?
The only thing we didn't mention was empty homes, but we brushed on it. There's 11,000 empty homes in Westminster. Nothing. A lot of this consultation and a lot of the stuff I've read. I know you've got the town centres things, but there's masses of areas that need redevelopment, and everyone's skipping over the facts. And when we talk about Brownside, everyone thinks of rubble. There's retail after retail after retail that's empty. Massive sheds what are empty. And there's no concentration on it. And I think the minute you open the doors on the release of the Greenbelt, they'll just walk onto the fields. In general, they'll just walk onto the fields. Well, thank you for coming to that.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, just before we finish, sorry, Andy, go on.
I'm sure. I was just going to try and just answer. You know, I do have the same concern. You know, so if you've got those sites, I stress this again: retail sites, brownfield sites, and you want to say to us, look again at these sites, then that's what this consultation is all about. You know, that is your opportunity to do that. And I don't want to see people walking straight into Greenbelt. I don't want that. Obviously, we're having to work towards a national planning framework and numbers, but I want what you just said you wanted. I mean, I hope today's been of some use to people. I hope if there's nothing else you take from it, take this from it. The commitment to consultation and listening to you is genuine. This is not because we're just kind of, you know, this isn't just like PR and anything like that. We are here because we want to carry on working with you, and if necessary, refine plans, whatever, through this process.
Can I just add something? Just going back, I'm going to be quick.
Paul, quick, come on.
In reference to the clarity issue before we brought up about accessing the consultation itself, would there be any consideration in extending the consultation so access to all is allowed? And are you looking into making it available? Because we don't forget, ordinarily this would be a 90-day consultation, you've crammed it into 2 months. And we're then asking during the course of this process for you to improve access to it.
Yeah.
We've got land. Shouldn't that be access to all now, really? And until that's right, should there not be a consideration in extending? I think
we've got a landowner that's removing signs informing our local community that this is happening.
Your side.
We've got your signs, the signs that you're putting up to tell our local community. We've got a landowner we've got good evidence of them removing those signs in Hyde.
GM44.
We've got that down on the list of questions.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Just for the benefit of openness, that's the point I'm trying to make.
I think
there was a big play on the first consultation that it was rubbish. You know, for access. Sorry, for access.
Come on, Paul, wind it up.
And so I'm saying, at the second opportunity to get it right, let's get it right.
Well, I will absolutely make that commitment again. If this group sends me all of the issues, we will get you a quick response. Hopefully next week on what we can and can't do.
Can we put in passport?
I think
disabled people.
Dave.
If that's one of the issues on the list, we will take it on board.
Right.
The extension, I think, is difficult because of PERDA and local elections and all of those issues. But send us the list and we'll give you an honest answer to each of the points on the list.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Fantastic. Could we, if we submit them to you, could we, so it would be agreeing a date for sort of responses, because what your response might help us to put our responses in. So could we say like 5 days? Or is that too?
In how quick we might?
In how quick you would respond to us?
Because consultation is kicking over.
I know, that's why I said we would endeavour to get back to you next week. The only reason I would just, you know, if we couldn't give you a full answer in 5 days and then we were like breach of trust, you know, I wouldn't want to do that. We would aim to get you it back next week.
That's fine.
I think.
Okay. Yeah. That's great.
Could I just say, Rachel and I have struggled with bringing copies of the exec summary. Please don't make us carry them home. There's not enough for everyone because we thought there was only about 35 people, but if you want to take one and some postcards, they're here.
Thank you very much. So can we just give a round of applause for Andy and
applause for Zoe as well for chairing that meeting.